Welcome to the Brave Parenting Podcast, an examination of the Bible and how parents can apply God's Word to raising kids in a culture saturated with media and technology. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Kelly here. I promise I will bring Chelsea back. She's just been really busy, so you've had me solo for quite a few episodes, but that's just the nature of life. But Chelsea is still right along with us here at Brave Parenting, and she'll be back here for our last podcast of the year, hopefully. So today I'm going to talk about friction, specifically the friction needed between us and our smartphones, but really any maybe smart technology. Now, what do I mean by friction when it comes to this online media and smart technology? Well, if we look at friction by definition, it is the force or resistance of motion between two objects, right? So friction is kind of like a force that slows down and eventually stops moving objects. So it's caused, if you think about it, when two objects are sort of like rubbing or are forced together. Now, in some situations, the smoother the surfaces are together, the less friction. And when there is a variance in the surfaces or when there's a greater force pressing the surfaces together, then there is greater friction and the objects are forced to change their movement. And this is exactly what we're aiming for. We want to change our movement or our behavior with our smartphones by adding some pressure, some force that changes how we are engaging with this technology. So we're going to apply this physics principle on how we can become a little less reliant, a little less obsessed or addicted, or even just instantly gratified by our smartphones. So I'm going to be presenting ways to add friction. I think we have about 13 or 14 ways to your smartphone and sort of limit its hold on your life so that you can intentionally add this difficulty and sort of add these roadblocks in order to diminish the absent-minded use of our smartphone, because we all pick it up thinking we're going to do one thing. And then 5-10 minutes later, we're like, wait, why did I get my phone out? Right? We all know this feeling. And I think that as we approach the new year, cannot even believe it, 2025, I can't think of a better method, a better thing to be sort of self-reflecting on and then moving towards intentional action is adding some friction. Now, maybe you hate the idea of New Year's resolutions, but hey, the reality is after the holidays and you are settled back into your routine of everyday life, it is a fantastic time to evaluate your relationship with your phone and to add this friction in order to reshape your smartphone habits. Now, to the naysayers, maybe you're thinking, I don't need friction. I have enough self-control. I don't need this. My phone habits are just fine. And anyway, why would I intentionally make my life harder? Right? It's all about making it easier so that I can be more efficient or rest more or do whatever. And you may think that this is just a punishment, but if you have children, they are watching, and every day your smartphone habits is going to shape how they will then later engage with their own smartphones when they have it. If you have teenagers especially, then you are just training them in the way that they are going to go by demonstrating how the smartphone is to be used. So if you can add more friction, then your children will then understand why they are going to have friction and why things are going to be a little bit harder and less convenient as they grow up with the smartphone. So we have to really be intentional about the modeling that we are giving our kids, because they're going to mimic our behavior. And so we need to look to the future and now intentionally act in a way that we want them to act when they are older and have a smartphone. And of course, since I am speaking to Christians, we're a Christian podcast, there are biblical principles that command us to not be taken captive by anything, to not indulge the flesh, to not conform to the world, or to love anything in the world. So therefore, how we engage with our smartphones matters greatly in our spiritual lives as well. If we are unwilling to give up some of our smartphone conveniences or even the distraction that it offers, what we have is actually worse than just smartphone smartphone or smart technology, we have an idol in our hands, is what it is. If we are unwilling to change our habits with that, then it becomes an idol. So here's the deal. I also think that we can make a pretty safe argument that God really specializes in causing friction. He intervenes in situations and in people's lives to redirect his people away from sin, to back to his will, and really to teach us spiritual lessons that we grow in sanctification. A lot of times we don't even realize the friction that God is causing in our life, the way that he is sovereignly orchestrating things. But friction is good. And I think that friction is godly. If we just consider the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, when God's people began to build a tower in a city in order to make a name for themselves, God intervened by confusing their languages. The work became too hard without the ability to communicate, and the project was thus abandoned, right? God added the friction to the situation in order to redirect people from terrible sin. Another example from the Old Testament is Balaam's donkey in Numbers 22. Balaam was tempted, by the allure of wealth to curse the Israelites. Well, as Balaam was traveling on his donkey, an angel of the Lord stood in the path, and then the donkey refused to move. And so ultimately, this altered Balaam's mission to curse God's people. God added friction through a physical barrier to prevent Balaam from wrongly cursing Israel. And there's just plenty more examples. We could continue to go on in the Old Testament, the New Testament. I also think of Paul's thorn in the flesh that he describes. And this is a friction basically is to make him or to keep him humble, is why God gave that to him. So friction is good and it is godly because it directs our lives away from sin and back into the Lord's will. And I think it's important for us to be intentional about adding our own friction, knowing that the smartphone can captivate us in a way that we don't have control over. The algorithms and just this allure of temptation, of distraction, of instant gratification. And so we, as God's people, as Christ followers, really need to be intentional about adding friction ourselves. Otherwise, God is going to add friction, and it might just be easier, I think, to go ahead and do that intentionally ourselves. Okay, so how do we add friction to our smartphone and the habits and tendencies that we have when we engage with it? Well, it's important to recognize that the core part of the problem with modern technologies is that it removes so many barriers. That it just becomes so easy. It's called smart because we don't have to be smart. It's just so easy, right, that an infant can use this smart technology. And so it removes these barriers to instant gratification. And thus, we sort of lose our ability to exert self-control. Now, in my book, Managing Media, Creating Character, this is a whole chapter on self-control. And I talk about this, and that's chapter 5. And when I cover the virtue and spiritual fruit of self-control, we talk about the 4 tactics that we can use in order to basically add friction, but increase our level of self-control. And those 4 tactics are pre-commitment, limiting the supply, modifying the environment, and reducing the allure. So I'm going to list these ways of adding friction. And they all pretty much fall into this category. You're either pre-committing to not using an app or using an app for only a limited amount of time. You're limiting the supply, the access that you have on your phone. You're modifying the environment. You're going to maybe make your phone look a little bit different, make it a little bit harder to access, and reducing the allure by either hiding apps or changing their location. There's all different methods that I'm going to go through. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, the core is we need more self-control. And if we're not exerting that, then these methods of adding friction can help us do that. So let me go ahead and jump into this list. The first tactic that we can use to add friction is to remove non-essential apps. So go through all of the apps. A lot of times you'll have an app in there that maybe you only download it for like a one-time or a couple-time use, and you can just go ahead and get rid of that. Having less apps on there is always better because it's just that much less to scroll through. So delete the apps, especially that are going to encourage really impulsive use. So that may be social media and maybe shopping apps or entertainment type apps. If you have Netflix on your phone and Netflix at home, I'm going to suggest that you just choose to watch it on the television at home because you're more likely to be in community when you're watching Netflix at home on your television than watching it privately on your phone. So you can delete an app like that. My pro tip would be to delete Amazon Prime. I hear from so many parents when it comes to self control, this app always comes up. So if this is a problem for you, you're always buying stuff, maybe more than you need to, delete Amazon Prime from your phone and force yourself to only use your home computer to, only be logged in on your laptop or whatever at home. Or a lot of people suggest maybe considering a 24-hour leave it in your cart type of method where after 24 hours, if you still want it, then you can purchase it. But it's just way too easy. There is very little friction on Amazon Prime to purchase things. Another thing that you can consider, I had mentioned social media. You don't necessarily have to delete your social media accounts. But if you want to spend less time on your phone, one of the other best ways, other than like streaming apps, is social media. So you can maybe just delete it from your home screen. Maybe again, just use it on your home laptop, and that can decrease the amount of time that you're spending on it. Or you could also bury it in a folder somewhere so it's a little bit harder to find. Or you know what? You can consider going all in and just getting rid of every non-essential app that's, not communication, email, or texting related. If it's any sort of entertainment or distraction, get rid of it. You can do that, right? We have the ability. Okay, number 2, this is so important. Disable notifications. You need to turn off all non-essential notifications. So especially social media notifications. I think Instagram and TikTok alone could probably set you into the hundreds of notifications per day. So disable all of them. If email is not a critical part of your life, disable the notifications on email. Otherwise, you're just constantly getting dings and being distracted, being the allure back into the phone with every single notification. You can set up specific times to check the apps and manually rather than relying on the notification to sort of prompt your engagement into the phone. Okay, so turn off those notifications. Number 3, disable Siri or any other AI assistant features that you may have if it's an Android or an iPhone, whichever it may be. Because if you only have to speak and it happens, there is no friction. And I still kind of believe that ability really only belongs to God. In the beginning, before there was anything, God spoke it all into existence. And when we have that ability to do that on our phone, hey, order this, do that, set up this appointment, all of that, it sounds really, really good, but there is almost zero level of friction there. And I think we're only going to begin to see as the year continues in 2025 and all of these AI assistants become a bigger, more prominent feature in our smartphones, that it's going to have unintended consequences. There's going to be aspects of our life that is displaced or changed. We never know what it is. We're not very good, it seems like, at predicting it. We already know that so much of the smartphone has caused isolation. And so, again, just go ahead and disable Siri. That's a great way to add friction back to your phone so that you're not using it as a lifeline, not dependent on it. Okay, number 4, set up screen time limits. So these are usually built-in features. Of course, Apple's screen time, Android's digital well-being. You can use that to set daily limits for your app usage. I highly recommend this, especially for social media. Adults are using 2 to 3 hours of social media. So it's less than teenagers, but still adults are spending a lot of time on social media platforms. And so you need time limits. We all do. So this is a great way to do that. If you're not going to delete the app, set a screen time limit. And then you can review your usage reports as well. Again, it's going to tell you how much time you're using every day on an average per week. And then you can sort of tighten up those limits if you need to. Maybe you start with, an hour and then you work your way down until maybe you're only using 5 or 10 minutes a day. What a dream that would be, right? You can also have your spouse, or even better, have your child or your teenager set up the 4-digit password, your screen time password. And that way, if you need more time, you have to ask someone else and explain to that person why you need extra time. If you want to add friction, that is my pro tip. That is going to add friction so fast if you want to decrease your time, because no one is going to want to go to their child and say, can you enter your password so that mommy can have more time on Instagram? Right? No, no one would. I don't think anybody would do that. I hope you won't do that. All right. Number 5, use a time locking app. So this is sort of an extra app that you're going to download, but it helps sort of keep control of your apps in specific times and usage limits and all of that. If you don't like, say, Apple Screen Time or Android's digital well-being, you can use something like Freedom or App Block, and those can also work on your home computers. So just FYI, those type of apps create more physical barriers, again, to prevent easy access to the distracting apps. So it's very similar to the screen time limits, but it's just another app or program that you're using that for. Number 6, use the do not disturb mode. I highly recommend this as well. This is such an easy thing. Once you set it up, it's really easy to access it. Put yourself in do not disturb. When people go into the text message, you'll see that you have notifications silenced. And so maybe they know that you don't want to be distracted at that point. Or even if they do send the text, they know that you're not going to get it immediately. They're not going to expect a response immediately because they can see that you're in do not disturb. And you can set it so that maybe you still receive notifications from your spouse or, your aging parent or your child. You can still keep certain notifications, but you can just eliminate during that time. You can do deep work or focus or just not be distracted with that do not disturb feature. All right, number 7, you can disable the fingerprint or the Face ID unlock feature to get, to your home screen. Now, if you switch it to manual unlock with a passcode, you can even make the passcode longer so that it's even harder to get into the phone, because it's really easy when you can just hold it up to your face and it opens up, right? Very little friction. But typing in a password or using your fingerprint, if you still have one of those phones, makes it a lot harder. And that pause, that extra couple of seconds of typing in that password it really can give you a moment to think before you're using your phone. Why am I going into this? Or sometimes it's just that difficult that you just don't go into it. So increase the length of your passcode. You can even set your lock screen to activate more quickly after inactivity. So instead of staying open for say 30 seconds or a minute, you can set it to be even shorter so that it closes and you have to kind of open your phone and put your password back in. And that is another way of adding friction into getting into and gaining access to the phone. All right. Number 8, use grayscale mode. Now, a lot of people don't even know this exists, but you can switch your phone display to a grayscale to make it less visually stimulating. So obviously, we open our phones, it's so colorful and bright, and we think, oh, that doesn't affect us, but it does. Psychologically, there is an allure with the way that these apps look, and our brain likes them. They're colorful, they're beautiful, they draw our attention. They are alluring. So if we make it grayscale, you can do this on both the iPhone and the Android. It can just make it a little less appealing, can help break that dopamine driven cycle that's kind of tied to the colorful app icons. And then again, by making your phone a little more less aesthetically pleasing, a little more dull, the temptation to interact with it can possibly decrease. So that can be helpful. All right, number 9, keep your phone out of reach. This is a novel concept, I know, right? But you can place your phone in a drawer in another room, in a designated phone box, such as RO, that we often recommend here at Brave Parenting. Whether that be in your evening time when you're home from work and you're spending time with family. Maybe it's while you're eating meals, or maybe it's while if you work at home, you can maybe do that. If you're doing something that does not require you to be in access to your phone, setting it out of reach is by far the easiest way to not use it, of course. And you can also set up specific phone free zones in your house, or maybe even time frames in your house. So maybe that's no phone in the bedroom. It's a great example to set for your kids. I know that's hard for many adults, but maybe you're doing no phone in the car. That way, your kids are always engaging with you. If they have their own phone, you're not on your phone while you're driving. Please don't do that. Or maybe you're doing the dinner table, something like that. You can set up those type of time frames where the phone is just not accessible. And of course, my pro tip, I've been saying this for years, I still use an old school alarm clock. I have to get out of my bed. I have to hit the button. I think I've had this thing since college and it still works, but use an old school alarm clock to wake yourself up instead of your phone. Because once you hit that snooze or you hit that off button for your alarm, you're much more likely just to open it up to see what happened in the middle of the night while you were sleeping. And that is a very unhealthy habit to get into. As believers, I would encourage you to, make prayer or time reading God's word. Anything is better than looking at your emails, your text messages, or the news first thing in the morning. All right, number 10, you can set app specific restrictions on your phone. So, for example, you can disable in-app browsing for social media like Twitter, or Instagram, any of those. So that you are forced to, if you were to click on something, you have to go then to a web browser. You can't just do the in-app browsing. So it's a little slower, it's a little less engaging. That causes some friction. That can maybe change your habits. You can also disable autoplay on YouTube. What? Yes, you can disable the autoplay on YouTube, and I highly encourage you to do that. You can also disable location services. Again, the background refresh, even the microphone access, the photo roll access, any of those anything that can cause a little bit of extra few seconds to just change your behaviors is good. This type of friction is good because it makes us think twice about all of these conveniences and how much time we spend engaging with them. Okay, moving right along. Number 11, we can use widgets for essential apps. Now, experts say I have not tried this, but I'm planning to so that I can present this to you as an actual worthy or not worthy type of benefit. But this is what a lot of experts will say, to use widgets for your essential apps. And that's like weather, the calendar, or messaging. You do that on your home screen. So you don't need to open the phone. You don't need to type in your passwords. If you want to know what the weather is, you can just tap your screen to light it up. You can see what the weather is right then and there. So again, I'll be sharing more on that soon. But if you are using them already, maybe you already know, this is a way to sort of just change the friction a little bit. All right, brings us to number 12. You can limit your data usage or turn off cellular data on your phone. So if you set a cap on your mobile data usage, like whether through your cellular service provider, or you just turn off cellular data for certain apps, it forces you to use them only when you're connected to Wi-Fi, which is typically, or hopefully at home. Maybe it's when you're out and about, but that little bit of friction can also change your behavior on your phone because you're limiting access to a lot of the distractions when you're out and about and you're not connected to the cellular and you are requiring Wi-Fi. Okay, my last one, and I have found this to be my most beneficial one, but it is adding another piece of technology, and that is to consider using a smartwatch with cellular service. Now, I do have an Apple Watch with cellular, and so it enables me to leave my phone behind. Whether I leave it in a drawer, I just leave it in my bedroom, I leave it wherever. And I can have my watch, which is going to give me notifications, of course, the only ones that I have allowed my watch to give me. And I can check the weather, but I can't scroll anything. I can't even really read an email. I can see if an email came in. I can maybe read the subject, but it's really difficult, right, to do that on a smartwatch. Maybe if you had a really great eyesight. But that to me has been a game changer because I don't have to pull out my phone and look. I can glance at my watch, see if it is an important notification coming in. Again, I've already limited my notifications. So only the most important I think are coming in. When it comes to text messages, do I need to reply right now or can I just wait? And so I don't have to pull my phone out, because if I pull my phone out, I'm chances are going to get distracted with whatever it is that I see, because I'm human just like everybody else. So this, to me, even though it's another piece of technology that I'm wearing on me almost all the time, to me has enabled me to leave my phone, which is a great thing. So now, with all of those stated, if every one of them fails and you just cannot stop engaging with your phone 7, 8, 9 hours a day, whatever it is, I am going to suggest that you just potentially think about downgrading to a basic phone. Like, if you really want to change your habits, downgrade your phone. Like, right, get rid of the smartphone. There is a trend of this, right? There's actually more dumb phones or non-smartphones that are coming out, not just for kids, but for adults as well. So this actually is a viable option. I actually am hearing like more of CEOs and business leaders doing it because they get so attached to their phone that they cannot remove themselves from all of the notifications, all of the distractions. And so they're going back to sort of dumb phones so they can be a little more disconnected and more connected with their family because they don't have all those notifications coming in. Now, with that said, I just want to reiterate why I'm doing that, why we're talking about friction, why this is important. The average screen time for an American adult is 7 hours and 3 minutes a day. 7 hours and 3 minutes a day. And that's screen time. Now, that in that range is not any work related screen time. Now, a lot of times work related screen time kind of overflows with other things. And so it is a hard thing to measure. But I think of like my own job as a pharmacist. I look at a computer, obviously 8 hours a day. For the most part, I'm staring at that computer, looking at prescriptions, but that's not actually my screen time, right? My screen time is the time that I'm engaging with my smartphone or the television at home or my computer or laptop, whatever that is. So it's kind of hard to gauge this time, but when the researchers have studied this, they've taken this 7 hours and 3 minutes, and then they've even broken it down into where they can broadly say where the time is being spent. And for adults, now, that can be adults without children in the home. It can be adults with children. It varies. It's all adults. But the time on social media is 2 hours and 24 minutes a day. 2 hours and 24 minutes a day on social media. And television streaming, Netflix or any of those, and that could be on a phone, but it could also be on a television. That average is 3 hours and 6 minutes a day. So just those two things alone, I mentioned it before when we talked about deleting certain apps from your smartphone. This is why we need friction. If our children are seeing us on average 7 hours, I mean, they're not with us maybe all that time awake if they're at school or whatever, but still some of this time has to be in front of them. And to me, I would say that is too much because again, as Proverbs 22:6 says, raise up a child in the way that they should go. And when they are older, they will not depart from it. If you are raising your child up to be on a screen this much, because that's what you're doing and that's what you're allowing them to kind of come alongside you and do as well, it's too much screen time. When they grow up, when they become teenagers, when they become young adults, that is how their life is going to be driven. It's going to be driven and connected to, dependent on constant screen media, whether it be entertainment or distraction, whatever that is. And it's unhealthy ultimately for children, and it's unhealthy for us as adults, as parents, in order to take care of ourselves relationally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, especially because we're not engaging all those 2 hours. That is not spiritual enrichment most of the time. I would say argue almost none of the time, as well as streaming TV. Yeah, there's stuff you could stream that might be Christian-based, Bible-based, but ultimately, we all know that that's not. And so for our spiritual health, we need friction. Friction is what we need. So these conveniences, as I talked about, I think in the couple podcasts ago when we talked about Uber teen accounts, these conveniences all come at a cost. And it seems fun and amazing. And so all of a sudden we have to we have to start paying that cost. And then it becomes real and we don't realize what it is that we have lost, right? So we're like 20 years into the smartphone and we're realizing now there's just been a detrimental isolation from community. And that has harmed not only children, but adults, but the elderly as well. And so I think if we can get on top of this as Christian parents, we can not only change the trajectory for ourselves, our communities, our families, change the trajectory of our children and their friends. So if friction keeps us from creating idols of our smartphones, then amen, it is worth it. If it keeps us from sinning, oh, it is way worth it. And if friction helps us to pursue holiness and spiritual maturity, it is worth its weight in gold. We should be running and grabbing our smartphones to begin adding friction right now. But especially if it helps us set a positive example for our kids, then we need to do this today, not tomorrow, but today. So hopefully something from this list jumped out to you, moved in your spirit as a way that you could add friction and get some benefit from being less dependent upon your smartphone as we end 2024 and go into 2025. I will have these different ways listed in a post on the website if you need to refer back to the list, if you kind of want to go through it as a checklist and start moving down things, maybe doing something different every month. I cannot encourage you enough, right, to talk this over with your spouse, even your children. If they have phones, talk about it with your best friends. Maybe do it together. Everything is easier in community and within relationship with one another. And this adding friction is no different. Do it in community and you'll see more success. Okay, friends, before I sign off for this episode, I want to remind all of you, all of our brave parents out there that are listening, that we are scheduling events for 2025 and our calendar is starting to fill up. So if you or your church, your youth group, your school, Christian school, or business, if any of y'all would be interested in having Brave Parenting come and speak in the year of 2025, please reach out. Even if you aren't the authorized person to schedule that event, maybe go talk to your pastor, the principal, the head of school, or your boss. Go and talk to them. You can reach out to us at braveparenting.net/events. You can fill out the interest form and we can just kind of get the ball rolling, talk about what options there may be, what kind of topics might be beneficial for your people. And then we can work on dates. We can reserve one tentatively for you just so that we can get that on the books for you. So thank you so much for listening. Until next time, go and be brave and go and add some friction. We'll see you next time.